It's interesting because I found a bookmark in the study of the house that I'm living in that was my parents' house. And since my mother passed a year ago, I've been going through their things and trying to decide what to keep and what needs to be passed on. And this day when I walked in, I saw this bookmark laying on the floor. And it caught my eye because the colors are, it's white with the green ink. And those are the colors that I recently painted the interior of the house. So I thought, oh, look, the bookmark goes with the room now. But then I picked it up and read it, and I realized that it was one of the bookmarks that was made many years ago here at Questhaven. And on one side is a quote from my father, Dr. Stephen Isaac, and on it he said, "If the cornerstone of one's education is learning to read, the cornerstone of one's discipleship is learning to see." And it was pretty much what he was saying in that opening soul video that we saw, that in order for us to really be able to make progress in this world, we do need to be able to see with our inner eyes and be able to learn to use that intuition to really be able to progress. And then on the other side of the bookmark was the Aramaic prayer of Jesus. And we're all familiar with the Lord's Prayer that we just sang here. But you probably are also aware there are other translations of it. And there was a scholar by the name of Sadi Neil Douglas Klutz who wrote Prayers of the Cosmos. And in that, he took the Aramaic version and then retranslated it into English. And there are some different versions of that as well, because we know words can have different meanings and things. But this particular version on the bookmark really spoke to me. And I'm just going to use the middle part where it says, "Grant us what we need each day in bread and insight. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Don't let surface things delude us, but free us from what holds us back." And that to me was so powerful. And then that opening or the first sentence, "Grant us what we need each day in bread and insight," is again that whole learning to see inwardly and to be open to the guidance from God and the divine. And then to loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. We'll be going into that in more detail in a moment. And then the final line, "Don't let surface things delude us, but free us from what holds us back." Isn't that really what we want in our life? We want to be freed so that we can continue to make our path upward. And when I read that, I was very inspired, and I let it kind of scintillate through me, but I didn't know if it was going to be something I would be sharing with you today. But then I picked up a book that I'd also found in my parents' library and had already started reading, and it's the book Fire in the Soul, written by Dr. Joan Barasenko. And if you're not familiar with her, she's very well known in the healing community, particularly with the mind-body connection. She's a psychologist who was one of the architects of the field known as psychoneuroimmunology. It's a big word. But she's written many, many books and is still active in that field today. And as I opened the book to where I was reading, the very next chapter was called Forgiveness and Freedom, the Telling of an Ancient Tale. And I thought, maybe that's telling me I do need to look at this in deeper way. She actually shared the same translation that I just read of the Aramaic prayer in that chapter, and she said that it gives the reader a better idea of the kind of letting go and unraveling of old knots that Jesus had in mind when he prayed. And she said that forgiveness is not just condoning irresponsible, hurtful behavior, nor is it a superficial turning of the other cheek that leaves us feeling victimized and martyred. Rather, it is the finishing of old business that allows us to experience the present, free of contamination from the past. And so if we go back to that prayer, it seems that Jesus was telling his followers, his disciples, that we are today, that we need to ask God or the divine to loosen those cords of mistakes binding us, as we then do our part to release the strands that we're holding on of others' guilt. And if we think of those cords as being energetic connections that we have with people in our lives or places or things, some of them can be positive, loving connections that perhaps feed us energetically and help us. And eventually, we know when we become masters, we won't need to have any attachments to anybody because they can do it in a very detached way. But at this point in our development, they may serve us in some way. However, we often have those cords or connections to, again, persons, events, places that we associate with a negative emotion, such as sadness, fear, anger. And I think a lot of that is due to some feelings of either guilt or blame. And so I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and just listen to those words again. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt.